What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking our Week 2 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup, so make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all, but with that being said, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdown, I want to highlight the sponsor of today's video, OddsJam. OddsJam continues to be the place that I use for all of my sports betting research, from the NFL, NBA, MLB, to daily fantasy and everything in between. But don't just take my word for it. Let me show you firsthand all the amazing tools OddsJam has to offer. Starting with their positive EV tool, which identifies situations where a single sportsbook has mispriced their line compared to the rest of the market. They're basically willing to pay a lot more so that you bet with them compared to the other sportsbook. At the end of the day, you're getting the best odds, essentially a mathematical edge and guaranteed money in the long run. But also available is OddsJam's arbitrage tool, which shows situations where the market is so mispriced that you can bet on both sides and guarantee a risk-free return. OddsJam's calculators show you exactly how much you have to bet on the over and under and what the respective guaranteed risk-free return would be. There's also OddsJam's Sportsbook tool, which consolidates all available market info, over 200 sportsbooks, and provides updates in real time and allows you to see line movement. But my personal favorite is their Fantasy Optimizer tool, which is great for those using PrizePicks, Underdogs, or other daily fantasy sites, as you get to see discrepancies between all of these sportsbooks. Imagine, PrizePicks has a Patrick Mahomes line at 200.5 passing yards, and all other books like FanDuel and Underdog have this line at 230 passing yards. Well, getting the over 200.5 on PrizePicks would be an absolute steal. Guess what? OddsJam does that for you. And the good news is, if you sign up today and use our code PIGSKIN, check the link and promo code in the description of this video, you will get 25% off your first month. OddsJam also has a 7-day free trial, so you get to try before you buy. So don't waste any more time and sign up for OddsJam using our code PIGSKIN today. We kick off Week 2 on Thursday with the Vikings at the Eagles. From a wide receiver perspective, this is a game that I like. It was on the other side of the spectrum when it came to running backs, but wide receivers, it's a different story. Starting with the Vikings, Justin Jefferson, even without a touchdown last week, he was electric, and that's going to be the case all season long, right? Top 3 wide receiver pretty much no matter what. That should be the case again for the Eagles game. Now, the number 2 guy here, Jordan Addison, I have KJ Osborne as a sit, even though he rivaled Addison in terms of targets. But to me, Addison is the more electric guy, higher upside. The Vikings invested higher draft capital in him more recently, and he flashed it in Week 1. Now, yes, without a touchdown, the performance wouldn't have been as impressive, but I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, back and forth, and I'll take a chance on Addison again. However, without a touchdown, I think he can be a little bit of a boom or bust guy, so I'm going to put him in the high-end wide receiver 3 category. For Philly, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, neither one blew you away, but it was a game where they didn't have to. The Eagles controlled that game, and Jalen Hurts didn't have to air it out a bunch. However, they still, put up respectable numbers. I think that they can both improve on what we saw in Week 1. There's going to be some ups and downs with these guys, maybe a little bit boom or bust. We've said that all season long. But either way, I think they can both be low to mid-level wide receiver 2s on the week. Worst case scenario, high-end wide receiver 2s otherwise. Moving on, we've got the Ravens at the Bengals. So for Baltimore, Zay Flowers was a pleasant surprise right away in Week 1. Pretty much put all the other wide receivers to shame, including Odell and Rashad Bateman, who we both have as sits. But I've said this before. For the Ravens, there's only going to be one fantasy viable wide receiver, and the fact that it was the rookie in Zay Flowers immediately by, a country mile in Week 1 is very nice to see. So I'm going to run with that, and I think that Flowers is going to be the top guy for them pretty much all season long. So I view him as a low-end wide receiver too, however, because with the Ravens passing attack, you never know. For Cincinnati, they're coming off a horrendous game all around. I mean, Joe Burrow struggled immensely. The Bengals offense struggled immensely. T. Higgins put up a 0, and you might be saying, how can you start him after that? Well, calm down. He still had 8 targets, right? So, Jamar Chase barely had like 40 yards. So you're not going to sit Jamar Chase. So with that same logic, you're not going to sit T. Higgins. They're both going to bounce back. Jamar Chase, obviously the higher upside. We've said it all season long. Higgins is much more volatile, but I think you go ahead and you start him here. Chase in the wide receiver 1 category, Higgins a boom or bust wide receiver 2. Then Boyd, I think, is an afterthought. Moving on, Seahawks at the Lions. The only Seahawks wide receiver I feel the most confident starting in is DK Metcalf. I think he just is a big body guy, red zone threat, so he's got the best chance of high upside, touchdowns, et cetera, but last week the Seahawks didn't look good. This was my worry that if Geno Smith doesn't pick up where he did last year, could be a disappointing performances for some of these guys. And with Jackson Smith and Jigba coming, Tyler Lockett's target share won't be as big. That's kind of what we saw. Now, I have Lockett as a start, but it's a flyer. I think it's going to be matchup-based, kind of continuing on in the season. And this is a good matchup versus the Lions. That's primarily why I'm starting Lockett. But I think he's somebody, again, he's going to be in the high-end wide receiver 3 category, especially with the more reps that Jackson Smith and Jigba gets. He's going to close that gap, and they're going to vulture each other. Right now, I have JSN as a sit, but we'll see how much longer that continues for. For the Lions, there's only one name. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown. He was great in week 1. He's going to be great all season long. He's a top 10 wide receiver on the year. I'm sitting Josh Reynolds and Marvin Jones. Yes, I know Josh Reynolds was pretty good in week 1, actually, but I think that there's just going to be too much variability here between Reynolds and Marvin Jones. And for that reason, I'd rather not take the chance in either one. Neither is anything extremely special. The Lions are going to feed the ball to, Montgomery, to Jahmyr Gibbs, to, maybe Laporta. So for that reason, I'd rather sit both these guys. Afterwards, Colts at the Texans. For the Colts, only one name I want to start. Michael Pittman. He was great in week 1. He proved that he's the veteran guy. Anthony Richardson went to him often, and I think that's going to be the case all season long. To me, he's a solid wide receiver 2 with, wide receiver 1 upside. I'm sitting Josh Downs. I just, I think he kind of looked like he could be the wide receiver 2, but just not enough targets there. And I think this game versus the Texans could be run heavy. For Houston, I'd take a chance on Nico Collins and Robert Woods, but let me be specific, primarily in PPR formats. Neither one is going to blow you away, but if they can both get 8 to 9 targets a game, they can be viable, and that's what you're looking for, between 10 and 15 fantasy points in full PPR from both of them. I think they're kind of in that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range, but at the end of the day, you could do a lot worse. Then Bears at the Buccaneers. Now, you see DJ Moore's name here for the Bears. He was extremely disappointing in week 1. Hell, the entire Bears offense was. This might be the last week where you see DJ Moore as a start, but you would think versus the Buccaneers, a team that DJ Moore knows very well from his time in Carolina, and after the Bears got absolutely hounded on for their crappy performance in week 1, they're going to change things up and they're going to air the football out more. I'll take a chance here on DJ Moore, knowing the talent, knowing the experience he has with the Buccaneers. But don't get me wrong, he is going to be big time boom or bust. Could be in the wide receiver 3 category when it's all said and done. For the Bucs, I feel more confident in Mike Evans. Again, he's the bigger body type of wide receiver that in an accurate Baker Mayfield is going to be more confident with. We kind of saw that in week 1. Godwin, only in PPR if you need it. And honestly, even then, I prefer only Mike Evans. I think it's going to be tough for the Bucs to sustain 2 fantasy-relevant wide receivers, but the Bears are so bad that this could be a matchup where you take advantage of that. And then for the Bears, you sit Darnell Mooney, you sit Chase Claypool. I still think that DJ Moore is the top guy, and anything we see otherwise is kind of a fluke, as was the case with Darnell Mooney last week. I just only one fantasy viable wide receiver for this offense as well. Then Chiefs at the Jaguars. I'm only interested in starting Calvin Ridley. We said it all offseason long. Ridley can be your league winner, and that's exactly what he showed in week 1. And he's the number 1 guy for Trevor Lawrence. I love him. I think he's a top 10 play on the week, and honestly, maybe even all season long. Yes, I'm sitting Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, but that's just because I think that Christian Kirk will kind of get back to what we saw last season, and Zay Jones is going to be a little bit more up and down. it's going to be really tough for me to pick which one of these two guys is going to become the true number 2 wide receiver for the Jaguars. Again, I think it'll be Kirk, but we'll see. I think this game will be a good litmus test, but until then, I'd rather sit both of them, not go chasing the points with Zay Jones. And then for the Chiefs, as crazy as it sounds, I'm sitting all Chiefs wide receivers. I really am. Look, assuming Travis Kelce comes back, are you saying you have faith in Kadarius Toney after what we saw, or Sky Moore, or these other guys? No, Travis Kelce is going to be the workhorse here, and everyone else is an afterthought. Moving on, Packers at the Falcons. I only really want to start one guy here for either teams. That's Christian Watson if he plays for Green Bay. If he doesn't, I'm not starting anyone here. And yes, I know Romeo Doubs had a solid performance versus the Bears, but I'm not going to go chase that small sample size. The Packers did a good job of spreading out the football. I think they're going to do the same here versus the Falcons. And then for Atlanta, I mean, if you watch that game, Drake London's a big name, but the takeaway is the Falcons are not going to pass the football a lot. It's going to be run the ball, and it's going to be just small dink and dump passes. Ritter is not a high volume quarterback, and to me that spells kind of bust situation for all those pass catchers, including Drake London, who I have as a sit. Then Raiders at the Bills. I'll start Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. I mean, Jacoby Myers, what a pleasant surprise. I did not have him out targeting Devontae Adams on my bingo card in week 1, but he was great. Devontae Adams, I think, is going to be a top 15 guy all season long. Just, even last week he was fine, just didn't get in the touchdown department. For the Bills, disappointing loss, but Stephon Diggs was great as always. Must start, top 10 wide receiver. I'm not starting Gabe Davis, though. I think he's going to be too up and down, too inconsistent. To me, it's Diggs, and then everyone else you're just kind of reaching for. But yeah, those are the main names to know in this game in particular. Then Chargers at the Titans. I mean, with the Chargers, it's the same old story. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, the top 2 guys. Keenan Allen, higher upside in PPR and kind of overall. And then Mike Williams, more that standard play. I have both those guys as kind of low to mid-level wide receiver 2s. Quinn Johnston, I'm sitting. Yes, I know he's an exciting rookie, but just too many guys in front of him. For the Titans, DeAndre Hopkins, the only name that you should really be considering. And it's all about volume in PPR formats precisely. And that's what you're going to get. You're going to get high volume. Not all the targets are going to be high quality targets, but you're going to get maybe 7 catches for 70 yards, something like that. So you take it, and you call him a solid mid-level wide receiver too. Then 49ers at the Rams. I'll start Brendan Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Ayuk, I said it all season long. Why draft Deebo Samuel that early when you can get Ayuk? And he proved us right this last week. Now, I don't expect 2 touchdowns every single week, but he was great. You might be surprised I'm starting Deebo Samuel, but this Rams team, I think, could be a favorable matchup for him here. So, yes, to me, he is a guy that is going to be more boom or bust, but the target share wasn't too far off to Brendan Ayuk's. However, I think he's more in that wide receiver 3 category. For the Rams, Puka Nacua was electric, great, even as a rookie. And people are going to say, yes, it's going to be a tough matchup this week. He's going to come back down to earth. All those things are true. But anytime you get that many targets, I think that there's something there. He was good in the preseason. There was that chemistry. And he's the guy of all these Rams wide receivers without Cooper Kupp that I would be taking a chance on weekly. I have him as a low-end wide receiver 2 on the week. Then the other guys, Tutu Atwell and Van Jefferson. I know Atwell was great also for the Rams, but this 49ers defense, I don't want to bank on more than one Rams wide receiver. And again, like I said, to me, it would be Nacua. So Atwell and Van Jefferson are both sits for me. Then Giants at the Cardinals. This one's simple, folks. You sit all the wide receivers in this matchup. The Giants last week got shut out 40-0. And, they had to pass the football. And even then, it wasn't that impressive. They just have so many mid guys at wide receiver that none of them stand out. And that they just, kind of distribute the ball that there's nobody here that you want. For the Cardinals, I think Marquise Brown is very talented. But Josh Dobbs is nothing special. I mean, he barely knows the names of the guys he's throwing it to. And the volume isn't as high for Marquise Brown as it should be. All the other guys to me are afterthoughts. If you force me to pick one guy here to start, it'd be Marquise Brown, but even then, I think he's in the wide receiver 3 category. Afterwards, Jets at the Cowboys. And this is probably the biggest name in terms of effects after week 1 in Garrett Wilson, in terms of high draft capital wide receivers that are going to take a big hit. And it's not due to an injury of his in Garrett Wilson. It's because of Aaron Rodgers. Because Aaron Rodgers' Achilles out for the entire year. That means it's Zach Wilson again in New York. And we all remember the ups and downs that meant for this Jets offense last year. And for all those pass catchers, Garrett Wilson is no longer a top 10 wide receiver on the year. He is now a boom or bust wide receiver 2, where the volume won't be there, the high quality targets won't be there. It's going to be tough for Garrett Wilson the remainder of the year. Completely changes his fantasy outlook unless the Jets add a veteran proven quarterback. For the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks. Look, neither of these guys had to do anything special. That's what happens when you win 40-0 the week before. But Lamb's still impressive. He's clearly the number 1 guy. Saw the same number of targets as Brendan Cooks. Michael Gallup didn't see anything at all. I have him as a sit. I think Cooks and Lamb are the top 2 guys. And I think this could be a game, especially if Sauce Gardner matches up with CeeDee Lamb, that Brendan Cooks could have a decent performance. I see him as a mid to high end wide receiver 2 on the week, and CeeDee Lamb high end wide receiver 2. Then Commanders at the Broncos. I only want to start Jahan Dotson here, and you might be saying, well, how are you not going to start the number 1 guy on this team, Terry McLaurin, here, but you're going to start Dotson? And my logic is that I think McLaurin's still not quite 100% from his preseason injury. Also, if he draws Patrick Surtain defensively, it's going to be a long day for him, so I'd rather pass on him. I don't love Sam Howell either. I'm not chasing the targets from Curtis Samuel. I still think he's number 3 here. So that kind of just leaves Jahan Dotson. But even with him, I think he's a low-end wide receiver 2 for the Broncos. Jerry Jeudy, if he plays, I will start him. I think there's going to be only one fantasy viable wide receiver here for the Broncos week in and week out. Just not seeing what we need from Russell Wilson. I know it's only been 1 week, but still, Courtland Sutton, I'm only starting if Jerry Jeudy does not play. Either way, both these guys, Jeudy and or Sutton, are in the low-end wide receiver 2 category for me and going to be kind of boom or bust all season long. Then Dolphins at the Patriots. You start Tyreek Hill, you start Jalen Waddle. Hill was sensational in week 1, and that's what you get with Hill. Some incredible performances. So, yeah, both these guys I think can be top 10 wide receivers on the week. For the Patriots, this is tough. Kendrick Bourne was very good in week 1. Is he going to continue to do that all season long? I don't know. I would say probably not. There's going to be a lot of back and forth with all these other pass catchers, but I think this can be a high-scoring game versus the Dolphins, so I'll give him a chance, but just realize whether it's Juju Smith-Schuster, who I have as sit here, or Kendrick Bourne, or any other New England wide receiver, they are boom or bust. This Patriots offense with Mac Jones at quarterback cannot sustain more than one fantasy-relevant wide receiver. They're going to be boom or bust wide receiver 3 guys all season long. Then Saints at the Panthers. You only want to start the Saints wide receivers here. It's that simple. Chris Olave, Michael Thomas. Olave is the number 1 guy. Great in week 1. Michael Thomas, surprisingly, saw a good amount of targets. And if we can get that from him every single week, like 8 targets, 6 catches for 60 yards every week, you take that happily. Low-end wide receiver 2. Panthers defense doesn't scare me. Shaheed is somebody that had a nice outing in week 1, but I'm not chasing it. And then for the Panthers, you sit all the Carolina wide receivers. It's as simple as that. And if they struggled versus the Falcons defense, I think they're going to struggle even more versus the Saints defense. So, yeah. Then Browns at the Steelers. I'll start Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore. I think, again, in week 1 for them, it was a game script where they didn't have to be that involved, but I think both of them are talented and can get the job done. To me, they are both, kind of low to mid-level wide receiver 2s for the Steelers. Deontay Johnson out for several weeks, so that leaves George Pickens as the number 1 guy in my eyes. But even then, Kenny Pickett is not somebody that I believe in, so temper your expectations. I think all these wide receivers for the Steelers are going to be boom or bust. I'm sitting Allen Robinson. I'm not reaching for a second wide receiver here for the Steelers. But with that, we wrap up our Week 2 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section if you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.